And welcome back to our coverage of ONS 2017. We're here with Ned Taleb. He's Chief Executive Officer at Nexius. We'll be talking about open source and open technologies and what they enable. And Ned, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Abe.
Thanks for being here. Now, of course, I'm sure you've heard the same that I've heard over the last couple of days at this particular conference. That's the Open Networking Summit. A lot about data science, a lot about deep learning, machine learning. What's the real impetus behind these efforts?
It's definitely now the trend, everybody talking about self-learning, deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence. The attempt has been ongoing for many years, of course, but I think it's accelerating now a lot. We're heading towards a network with 10 times the number of sites. We're heading towards billions of devices spitting data, and it's more data than anybody can analyze. I think most of the big data initiatives over the last few years have not yielded the results expected in terms of the monetization. We do believe that almost everything being done right now in virtualization is a prerequisite towards, or actually enables, machine learning to take place. Humans have to let go a little bit. We have to move in an autopilot mode, and we have to have the right visualization, allowing the humans to act as a pilot monitoring.
Tell me more about sort of where we are maybe on the cycle of allowing automation to automate and maybe more of a hands-off approach, letting the network do its job. Sort of, are we closer to the start line of that or the finish line of automation?
We're certainly at the start. I do want to say that the start is not just right now. You know, we've seen forms of machine learning for the last 10 years. But I do feel there's now a few attempts by certain operators around the world to have human-less analysis, customer care, optimization. But they're certainly at the start. I do believe the work required to get there is virtualization as a first step, for example, and also probably a lot of the IoT deployment. So there's more things that have to happen before we get the true ROI from machine learning.
Tell me about maybe a use case, maybe precision medicine, biotech, automated connected cars or autonomous cars. Which space is most interesting to you as we get into this machine learning and automation stage?
I do think it's the driverless cars, whether we call it autonomous cars or, but I think that by nature they are mobile, they will be spitting a lot of data, there will be communications vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to the site. There's still a lot of question marks as to whether the car does need to talk to the network and whether the investments into a low latency network will be required. But I do believe we're heading into many things that are unknown, despite what everybody says. And I do believe this will be a first very important use case of artificial intelligence.
Tell me again, it's a good segue, intelligent networks, maybe its effect on artificial intelligence, and maybe give us another use case or end use.
Sure, I do think also it's about the amount of data that would be thousands of percent what it is today. So even artificial intelligence and virtual reality, augmented reality and virtual reality, I do think that to support that, you need first to have a network closer to the edge. And I do think the amount of data we're going to be having will require definitely machine learning to process.
Ned, how much of your business now is really focused on the application of these technologies, AR, VR, AI, deep learning, machine learning, rather than trying to make your customers understand the functionality of the network itself?
Yes. It's increasingly towards the applications. So most of the operators, the only growth right now is in enterprises. It is in the applications of driverless cars, AI, AR, VR. It is also in telemedicine. So I think no discussion of technology can be taken as a siloed from the applications. It is also right now with IoT, the economics are not there yet. So the technology has to support much lower cost per connection and has to have different way of thinking about sessions, opening sessions with the devices, and also how to process the amount of analytics it will generate. So no discussions that technology can happen anymore in siloed or isolated from the applications.
Now, of course, the network virtualization space is getting a big crowd. You have carriers, enterprise players, now you have application developers that are coming into the space as well. Nexius is positioned in a unique space right now to really maybe mitigate all these areas. Can you kind of describe that to your positioning in the industry?
Sure, I believe virtualization is very important to reduce CapEx maybe, to reduce OpEx absolutely. So I believe that virtualization is not the end goal. I do think it's a very important requirement to make the network more computable and to allow things like artificial intelligence to take place. I think today there's a lot of dependency on closed box proprietary technologies, and I do think that having a vendor neutral approach towards virtualization is important. Some operators are at 50% network functions virtualized, others are just starting. I do think it's important to realize that this is a very important prerequisite before AI.
Now, of course, interoperability, especially in the cloud or in cloud technologies, is integral. Tell us about the importance of interoperability, but also if you could tie it back to where we are now. We're at the Open Networking Summit and the open source community.
Sure. Interoperability is important, but I do think in the telecom world it's overused, and it reminds me a bit of the old school, where they make it a lot as a pre-requirement. I do think we're heading into a world of continuous integration and continuous development, CI/CD, and I do think that integration has to happen, on the go. So a shift in mindset of the operators in particular, and that's what probably we get a lot from ONS. It is a shift in mindset as to how we deploy and integrate.
Now, of course, there's some technologies that we should be looking forward to, maybe even this time next year. I'm sure Nexius will be at these open source or Linux Foundation events. Can you maybe point to a couple of areas that maybe Nexius is working on?
Sure. First is network in a box. We believe with open source components, open platforms, we believe that the way connectivity is built will be very, very different. Integrated core and RAN. I know there's a lot of discussions about vRAN and XRAN and RAN in the cloud, but we're looking at really the RAN and the cloud and the ability to deploy 10x, 100x the number of sites really at the edge of the network. That's going to be very important. The second part is the entire management, orchestration, and automation in the way we manage these networks. It is maybe in the last generation we talked a lot about SON, self-optimizing networks. Now we're going to look at AI-based solutions to optimize a network that will be very different than the way it is right now in terms of number of sites and virtualized components.
Now, I do want to mention there is a bit of a history between TIA and Nexius. It was just a little bit less than 2 years ago that you received, John Donovan and Susan Johnson over at AT&T awarded Nexius with a supplier award, and that was at a TIA annual event. I just want to mention that really quickly. What was that experience?
This was actually just last summer, and yes, TIA was in conjunction with the AT&T Supplier Conference. And I know I was able to introduce John Donovan for his keynote speech, and he mentioned Nexius in his 20-minute speech, congratulating us. And the next day, Susan Johnson from supply chain gave us the award. So I do have definitely a soft spot from the last TIA event I sat down at.
Oh, we hope you attend our event in June. That's called the Connectivity Jams. We'd love to have Nexius there.
Thank you, Abe.
All right, Ned, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
And for all of our coverage here at ONS 2017, you can go to tinow.org. So long.